High in the California mountains, in the quiet of Bear Valley, stands a great house. Today it is silent, covered in snow in winter, warmed by the blazing sun in summer. Empty windows look out over the valley, while the wind drifts through rooms that were once full of life. Once, they echoed with the laughter of 8 children and the steady voice of their father, one of the toughest men American television had ever seen. His name was Robert Conrad. For millions of viewers in the 70s and 80s, he was the face of masculinity, a fearless secret agent, a daring fighter pilot, a hero who never backed down from danger. He was a star whose fame resounded across the world. But this story is not about the spotlight. It is about what happened when the cameras stopped rolling and the applause faded. It is the story of a man who spent his life playing unbeatable heroes, but fought his greatest and darkest battle in silence inside his mountain home, far from public view. It is a story of wealth that cannot be measured in dollars, of tragedy strong enough to break anyone, and of an iron will that proved stronger than paralysis and despair. It is time to discover who really stood behind the mask of the tough guy. To understand the tragedy that came later, you first need to know who Robert Conrad was to America in the 60s and 70s. He wasn't just an actor. He was the definition of cool. Short, muscular, with a permanent smirk and the energy of a boxer, he stormed onto television screens and forever changed the meaning of a hero. His ticket to fame was the cult series The Wild Wild West. In it, he played James West, a kind of James Bond in a Western setting. But that wasn't what truly made him stand out. At a time when most stars wouldn't risk breaking a fingernail, Conrad was a true adrenaline junkie. He performed all of his own stunts. If James West leaped from a rooftop onto a horse, you could be sure it was Conrad making the jump. Audiences knew it, and they loved him for that raw honesty. It was that daring spirit that built his legend. In 1968, during filming, he attempted a dangerous stunt, swinging from a chandelier and landing on a balcony. It went wrong. He fell nearly 4 meters, head first, onto a concrete floor. The result was a fractured skull and a severe concussion. That could have ended his career right then and there. But Conrad didn't just survive. He recovered, came back, and kept doing stunts. That day he carved his legend into concrete, because he was the real thing. He sealed that image again with another hit, Black Sheep Squadron, where he played a fearless ace pilot. And later, in a now famous commercial, he placed a battery on his shoulder and challenged the camera with, "Go ahead, knock it off." That was Robert Conrad in one line, bold, confident, and always ready to fight. He built an empire on the image of a man who couldn't be broken. And no one, not even Conrad himself, imagined that life's hardest blow would strike him far away from the set. With fame and fortune in hand, Robert Conrad made a choice few Hollywood stars would. Instead of another mansion in Beverly Hills, he set out to build his own empire, far from the chaos of Los Angeles. He chose the quiet mountain resort of Bear Valley in Northern California. And there, high on a peak with breathtaking views, he built not just a house, but a fortress for his growing clan. The estate was the physical expression of his success and his values. A massive Alpine-style home with heavy timber beams and stone fireplaces, it was designed to hold a large family. And Conrad's family truly was remarkable. He was married twice. His first marriage to Joan Kenley gave him 5 children. After their divorce, he married Lavelda Matthews, nearly 30 years his junior, and they had 3 more, 8 children in all. a number almost unheard of in Hollywood, where most stars stopped at one or two. Conrad was an old-school patriarch. He adored his team and wanted them to have the best of everything. The house on the mountain was their headquarters. It was where he taught them to ski, to hike, to be strong, and to be independent. He wasn't the kind of Hollywood father who saw his kids only on weekends. He was the center of their universe, strict but loving, the unshakable head of the Conrad clan. Bear Valley became his refuge, his personal kingdom. It was where he could take off the tough guy mask and simply be a father and a husband. He poured into the place not just money, but his soul. He believed he had created a world that was safe, permanent, untouchable. He had built the perfect fortress, never imagining that the deadliest enemy would one day strike, not from outside but from within. March 31st, 2003. That day changed everything. At 68 years old, Robert Conrad was still strong, still full of energy, but one mistake cost him nearly everything. He got behind the wheel of his Jaguar after drinking. On a highway not far from his mountain home, he crossed into the opposite lane and collided head-on with another car. In an instant, his world collapsed for the driver of the other vehicle, who also suffered serious injuries, and for Conrad himself. He survived, but the price was devastating. A severe spinal injury and nerve damage left him partially paralyzed. His right arm and leg were almost motionless. It was a cruel twist of fate. A man whose entire career and identity had been built on strength, athleticism, and independence suddenly found himself trapped inside his own body. The tough guy, who had always done his own stunts, could no longer walk on his own. The hero, who had never depended on anyone, now needed round-the-clock care. For a man as proud and determined as Conrad, it felt like a sentence worse than death. Doctors offered little hope, quietly suggesting he would never move freely again. And yet, in the silence of a hospital room, his greatest and most important fight began. This time it wasn't against on-screen villains, but against his own body, against pain, against despair. That same steel backbone that had carried him through broken bones and dangerous stunts revealed itself once again. Conrad refused to give in. Months turned into years of grueling rehabilitation. Every step was agony. Every twitch of a paralyzed hand was a victory. He forced himself to fight through unbearable pain with the same defiance that once drove him to conquer Hollywood. It was the hardest stunt of his life, one performed without a stunt double, without applause, without a second take. This fight wasn't for fame, but for the simple right to live. And though he never fully defeated paralysis, Conrad never allowed paralysis to defeat him. After the accident, Robert Conrad disappeared from the screen and from the public eye. The loud, fast-paced life of a Hollywood star gave way to a quieter, almost reclusive existence in his fortress on Bear Mountain. He could no longer play the tough guy, ski the slopes, or perform daring stunts. His world shrank to the size of his house and the terrace, from which he still looked out over his kingdom. But he was not broken. His home took on a new meaning. At his side was his second wife, Lavelda, who became his hands, his legs, and his greatest source of strength in this difficult new reality. Their love endured its hardest trial and only grew stronger. His 8 children and growing family of grandchildren often came to see him, filling the quiet house with noise, laughter, and life. The clan he had built now became his greatest shield and support. And even with physical limits, his fighter's spirit never left him. He launched his own radio show, broadcasting from his home. With his trademark humor and bluntness, he spoke about politics, Hollywood, and life, proving that even confined to a chair, he never lost himself. Financially, he was not a multimillionaire by today's Hollywood standards. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at several $1,000,000. But money was never his real legacy. His true wealth was his children. He raised them to be strong and independent, and many followed his path into the entertainment industry as producers, actors, and writers. The Conrad clan carried on his work in Hollywood. What he left behind was far greater than films and fortune. He left a bold legend of a fearless stuntman and a quiet, powerful example of how a man can stand tall even after life delivers its hardest blow. His greatest success, in the end, was not fame or fortune, but the family he built. The years passed. Robert Conrad continued his quiet life in the fortress on Bear Mountain. He lived almost 17 years after the accident, a span of time that was itself a testimony to his willpower. He watched his children and grandchildren grow, and each new day was a victory wrestled from fate. The sun of his life was setting. On February 8, 2020, at the age of 84, the heart of the old fighter finally stopped. The cause was heart failure, but what mattered most was how and where it happened. He did not pass away in a hospital, nor did he die alone. He left this world in his own home, in his own bed on top of the mountain, surrounded by his large, loving family. It was a quiet, peaceful ending to a loud and turbulent life. A man who had fallen headfirst onto concrete, survived near-fatal crashes, and battled paralysis, left this world calmly, as if fate itself had granted him the peace he had earned. It was the last sunset over Bear Mountain, not tragic, but majestic. The patriarch left his kingdom with dignity, remaining its center until the very end. He did not allow the accident to write the final chapter of his story. He wrote it himself, a chapter about dignity, about family, and about the peace that comes after a long and glorious battle. We began this story with the image of a quiet, empty house on top of a mountain. But now, after walking through the life of Robert Conrad, we see it differently. It no longer feels abandoned. It is filled with memory, with the echoes of a loud, vibrant life, and the traces of the greatest battle ever fought within its walls. Robert Conrad's legacy is far more than just roles in old TV shows. His story is a powerful reminder of what it truly means to be tough. He showed us that real strength is not throwing punches in front of a camera or pulling off dangerous stunts. Real strength is finding the courage to stand up after life knocks you down. It is the stubborn will that forces a broken body to keep moving. It is the spirit that refuses to let despair win. Today, his mountain home stands silent. But the real home that Conrad built was never made of wood and stone. It is his family, his children and grandchildren, who carry within them a piece of his unbreakable spirit. It is the legend he left behind, one that still inspires. The legend of a man who was a hero not only on screen, but even more so when no one was watching. And that may be the greatest lesson of his life. Fame fades, money runs out, and even the body can fail. But the strength of spirit and the love of family is the one fortress nothing can ever destroy. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss the next stories. More amazing tales are on the way. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.